there, and welcome to Daybreak Assembly Trinidad Live. We are thrilled that you joined us here this Sunday morning. Now remember, we have a great commission to go into all the world and preach the gospel. This year, our theme is a heart for God and a vision for the world. So, help us get into your network and share the gospel of Jesus Christ. And remember, in the middle of this crisis, Christ is. Stick with us.
Yes, so I am Bishop Victor Gill of Redemption Christian Center, and I have been saved under Pastor Alexander many years ago. I got saved from a background of Rastafarianism under a tree high, smoking weed, sitting next to my Rasta friend, and I heard this pastor preaching, and he said, look, these men went on a mission, and the virtue of the mission was, once it is accomplished, we put a new suit on every man. And I was frustrated. I mean, I was high. My face was drawn with marijuana. And he said, they went on the mission and they all got their new suits. I am listening on the block on a piece of log sitting. And he said, they got their new suits, but I know a man who can not only put a new suit on every man, but can put a new man in every suit. And that changed my life. So I raised my hand and I told my friend, I said, let's go. And he refused. But I went, and Pastor Alexander prayed for me. I remember how he squeezed my shoulder, and as he prayed for me, something happened that I did not even realize. My friend, as I said, not long after, he got shot in his head and died. Whatever he prayed, that arrested me, is still with me to this very day. If I put it over, I must put it in one word, that is gratitude. Gratitude. And it really, really touches me to respond to a question like that, because I felt I had to do it. I knew God had to be the ultimate source behind it. When I look at the end production, it took God. The work that I did. But I must say, from the depths of my heart, this man has touched my life. And I don't know for anyone else. There were many times when I see what God has done in my life. Sometimes I'll be traveling. I might be in my home. I could never get those words out of my mind. If it was not for Pastor Alexander, if it was not for Pastor Alexander, if it was not for that church that touched my life. And so we have to be gracious, we have to be thankful for people that touched my life. I didn't plan to be emotional saying this, but I don't think I could help it. You know, the members of the church who helped me through Bible school, the wife that I had, everything, and the image of the man, the way he handled himself in ministry, it was done in excellence, and so that gave me that spirit of excellence to do things in a certain way. I could never discount or minimize in any way. While we give God all the glory, a lot of who I am and who I will ever become has a lot to do with what He has sown in my life. Let me just add also that, many times we talk about the man of God. I know this is his birthday and so forth, but the whole film includes his wife also. We must always remember that, Sister Alexander standing at his side is very important. And so I thank God for her and the legacy that she has left, the way she has carried herself as a woman. And let us continue to pray also for Sister Alexander. Bear our hands in prayer. Okay, well, to do the film, I came up with a thought, and I felt that we should do something to capture the legacy and the history of the life of this great man that has blessed the Caribbean and many nations. I mean, when I heard this story about being invited to Times Square Church, and if you have ever been to that church, it's a really, really grand church. David Wilkerson has become a household name around the world and one of the fathers of the American nation. And I remember one time I was in the United States and somebody gave me a message that Pastor Alexander preached when he visited Times Square on the blood. And I tell you, I don't know that message is still around.
He said to them in a revelation of himself, I am not just a God among the gods. Hallelujah. I am God all by myself. Oh, hallelujah. I believe, my friend, that's the message we must get. God is not a God just among the gods. God is God all by himself. The only one that's deserving to be called God. He is the one that...
That was a message, and I think that message sold thousands. I think it was about 30-something or 60-something thousand people in high position in the United States receive that message. And but I'm saying all of that to say, when he told me about David Wilkerson asking him to be one of the pastors in Times Square, to me that was such a tremendous opportunity. As a matter of fact, he said that what they were offering him there as a salary, what he's receiving here is not even the tithe, not even a tenth, and he refused to stay over. And so I put together a team. We had a graphic artist, Andre Phillip, and he was also a cameraman. His wife also was a graphic artist, is a graphic artist. And then we had Dr. Akil Murray, who was lecturing in UWI, and he has his doctorate in history. So he studied in Pentecostal church, and he understands, I believe more than anyone else, the historicity of Pentecostalism in the Caribbean. So they went to Grenada to get the footage and they saw the history, and we worked together. I became the executive editor, and I was the one to tell them, no, put this here, put that there. It was like God, because they themselves admitted there's no way we could have done this. When they went to Grenada and came back, I was amazed to see the things that they captured. Also, Akil would have visited Grenada and would have made contact also with someone who knew Pastor Alexander in Grenada. So, from this, what I would like you to take away is that we have a great man. We have a man that has touched many lives, and we must never take it for granted. Listen to his words. Believe what you're hearing, because not many people preach sound doctrine. And so I think we want to recognize while he's alive that he can spell it for us. And let us be a blessing to him as much as we can, and pray for him. Pray for him in this senior part of his life. He needs our prayers, he needs our support, he needs our love, he needs our contribution. Paul said, pray for me. Sometimes we take it for granted. They say, Pastor, bless all of us. But I believe that one of the best things we can do, apart from giving and all these things, is to really intercede for our leaders, as Paul requested. Pray for me. Amen. Do that, saints of God. And watch this. God will bless you. What you make happen for others, God will make happen for you.
Pentecostalism emerged out of the Second Great Awakening in North America, where a great fervor within Christian circles blossomed, forming new denominations. By the turn of the 20th century, a son of former slaves, William J. Seymour, presided over a great revival at 312 Azusa Street, Los Angeles, where the gift of speaking in tongues was greatly manifested as persons tarried in the presence of the Lord. People from all over the world visited the revival, including enthusiastic Christians from Canada who were eager to experience the infilling of the Holy Ghost. These Canadians took the revival back to Canada, rejuvenating the Pentecostal message by preaching and establishing churches. A passionate member of the Holiness Movement, Robert Jameson, returned to Canada on furlough and attended one of these Pentecostal gatherings in New Hampshire in 1910. After being bestowed with the gift of speaking in tongues, Jameson, with the able assistance of his wife, Elizabeth, took the message of Pentecostalism and Christ to the West Indies. In 1926, the Jamesons joined with the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada after it was agreed that the Assemblies of God in the U.S. would relinquish their mission in the West Indies, conceding control to the Pentecostal institution. The Jamesons and other missionaries would carry the message of Christ throughout the Caribbean, rapidly constructing missions on the islands of Montserrat, St. Croix, Barbados, Grenada, and Trinidad and Tobago. By 1923, after having temporary shelter at numerous areas in Woodbrook, the Jamesons settled and constructed the first Pentecostal church in Trinidad after leasing a piece of land at 11 Gala Street, Woodbrook. This church, which was first called the Glad Tidings Pentecostal Church, would go on to be renamed Woodbrook Pentecostal Church. Woodbrook Pentecostal would prove critical to the development of Pentecostalism in the region, as it served as the unofficial headquarters of the mission during the early years of missionary activity, and was the first stop and place of orientation for any missionary who visited the Trinidad mission. The establishment of the West Indies School of Theology in Trinidad in 1946 was a critical component of the PAOC's plan to decolonize the institution by training and equipping local members, grooming them for independent leadership of the work. Within this paradigm, local Pentecostal bastions emerged, chartering a new course for the faith. It is from this juncture that we trace the life of a young man who will emerge to be one of the most effective voices of the Pentecostal movement in the West Indies.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Grenada. We have just landed at Morris Bishop International Airport. For your continued safety, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the fasten seatbelt sign has been switched off.
are on the beautiful spice island of Grenada, in the northern village of Sortes, a beautiful place with warm people, beautiful views, a very nice jetty, and wonderful and warming fishermen. We are here at Leapers Hill, a monument made in honor of the Caribs, who in defiance of French control, exploitation, and dominance, decided to take a leap. We are also here to talk about the life, the journey of a young man who also took a leap of faith. That young man's name is Alister Alexander. First, you want to look at your past, where you have grown up and so forth. Could you give us an idea of where you were born?
Yeah, well, I was born in Grenada, a village called River Sally. That's at the northern point of the island.
River Sally.
Yeah. And it's quite a little while ago.
Yes, of course. How long ago was that?
That was 1933. The birth paper says my mother differs with that 1 year later, but officially.
Wow, 1933.
1933.
Okay. What was he as a young kid? Was he a jovial, comical sort of person? Was he a quiet kind of guy?
Well, he was not that quiet in the true sense, but he was just midway.
Midway. He was a good balance.
He was a balanced fellow. The environment was very good around us. And in those days, we didn't know anything as violence and corruption among young people. No. Everybody had a good standard, because I believe that was the common way of the parents to train their children the way they should go, what they know.
With 5 kids in the home, you all still had that camaraderie and that fun with one another.
Yes, man, yeah.
Despite the fact that you all were, you know, sort of in a lonely area.
What?
Yeah?
Partly every night we playing coop.
Coop?
Yes.
What's that? What's that?
Well, it's a game we play. You go in and hide, and somebody come in and look for you to see if they could see you.
The old time terminology for hide and seek.
Yes, hide and seek. That's right.
Okay.
Yes, we call it so. And there are many games we used to play among ourselves. I could remember one person will stay and the other 4 will go, and they come in now, say, I am the person who come in and ask for a favor. Good day, Miss Deadshot Tree. I come and ask you if you could give me a piece of Deadshot, please. And then now, as though a dog is there to take the person, to take the children, you know. And one will represent the dog, and the dog start to back, running behind the others. We had real fun in those days as children.
How was life in the village of River Sally?
Religion played quite a part in it, because even in the school management, the priest figured out quite prominently.
Okay.
And that's the kind of a setup that we had.
It was in the hallways of this very Catholic church, St. Teresa's Roman Catholic Church, that a young Alister Alexander would have garnered his first experiences of Christianity and spirituality. Through the influence of his grandmother Minnie, he served as a potential acolyte at a very young age.
In those days, education was not as developed. Most of the schools were primary schools. In fact, there was just one grammar school in the chief city, that's St. George's, in those days. And so if you had to move from the elementary to high school, secondary education, you had one chance in that school.
Were you able to access that education?
Yes, I thought from early childhood that God had blessed me with some measure of intelligence. As a matter of fact, the country offered a scholarship. I think it was just about 10 persons would gain access to that grammar school each year from the island.
Right.
And so the schools picked the students that were considered eligible. And fortunately, I was picked in that bunch to be there, so I took the extra lessons and so for the examination.
He was a leading student in every class. Every class he was a leading student, you believe. Nobody could come before him. I know that. Many of the classes he was a prefect.
Unfortunately, I didn't quite make it because of an unfortunate situation. I don't know if it is prudent for me to tell you what it was.
Yes, of course you can. Of course you can.
Yes, we came from a poor family. Not that my immediate parents or father was poor.
Right.
My father was a very well-known pharmacist, but as it was, particularly in those days, I was not a legitimate birth.
Right.
So I didn't have access to that main family.
Again, because of the religious influence on education at the time.
Especially. So that I was supposed to have been in the city the day before, and for some unfortunate reason I didn't get there.
During his childhood years, a young Alister remained devoid of the influence of his parents. This was due in part to the societal pressures fostered by the Christian hegemonic sentiments that pervaded Grenadian society at the time of his birth. The stigma attached to an illegitimate child, as was the label given in those days to children born outside of wedlock, contributed to the absence of Alister's father in his upbringing. His father, a well-known pharmacist by profession, and his mother Alberta, a woman of lesser economic prowess, created an economic disparity that played a part in the capricious nature of their relationship, which would eventually see its demise. Soon his mother Alberta would venture to Trinidad in search of greener pastures, leaving a young Alister in the company of his older siblings, Denise and Stafford, cousins Lillian and Leon, and Auntie Imelda. However, it was the care and nurturing of his grandparents, Phileas and Minnie Toussaint, that would serve as a resolute proxy in his life, laying the foundation for the emergence of an exceptional young man. Okay, who would you say were some of the influential figures in your childhood years?
I had a very loving grandfather and grandmother. I called my grandmother a home philosopher because she gave us some kind of philosophical teaching that has remained in me until this day. Things like show me your friends and I will tell you who you are. Things like if you live to become useful, you've got to live with a focus. And lots of those philosophical statements that I felt very, very useful. As a matter of fact, I thought I would like to live my life by some of those statements.
When she gives a command, we must carry it out. she was not a person to make joke with her children when she gives a command. What we have to do, we just have to do. For instance, I remember when he gave us a Sunday evening time to play and so forth, and she will say very sternly, make sure you all come back before sundown.
Yes.
Well, each one of us looking at the time when we see sun going down, we just heading for home, one in front of the other.
And then my grandfather, well, he was a very moral man, and they were very deeply religious in the Roman Catholic Church. So I grew up in that environment.
At the age of 17, he was invited by his close friend Roy Marshall to a Pentecostal service not too far from this location. Alexander decided that it was time to change. It was time to turn a new leaf in his spiritual life. This would prove to be a major challenge to him, as the Catholic Church did not stand only as a strong religious symbol, but also it had close links to the socio-economic status of its citizens. This in itself would prove to be a major challenge to Alister as he charted a new course and ventured into the hallways of Pentecostalism.
At the age of 17, I had a very close friend. His name was Roy Marshall, and he was a chief acolyte, and he got in contact with the Pentecostal people and had a very transforming experience. I could see it on his life. He was absolutely changed from what I knew he was in his childhood days. And so I inquired of him what the situation was, and he told me that he had really accepted Christ as Savior, and I argued with him because I knew quite a bit by that time of the background of the Roman Catholic religion. And he gave me some literature, and I actually read myself into conviction that there was something more than what we had. I was 17 years old, but I went to the altar, and for the first time in a religious setting, tears came to my eyes. I found myself crying at an altar. It was an All Year's night, and we had some plans set up for the New Year's Day. We go to the races and so on, then we had some party arranged after that. And the change was so impacting as far as I was concerned. When I got up the next morning, it was like the sun was shining with a golden hue, actually. And I sat under a little mango tree, and the fellows pulled up and said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Guys, I'm finished. I'm no longer going in this." It was a radical change that came over me, very radical. So for the first time that I entered into a Pentecostal church, I went in there determined that I would start anew in my spiritual life. In those days, you either in or out. You couldn't be synthetic in your address to your thing, because you wouldn't last. If you were Pentecostal, you were either fanatical or you were illiterate. And so there was a stigma.
So Roy Marshall was that influential figure?
A very influential figure. When I said, how do we tell the priest that we have found Christ and have that experience? And he said to me, he said, "I know you are retiring in your disposition, leave it to me." And he was the chief acolyte, so I hid behind him.
Conversion did not only mean someone is disagreeing with your religious conviction, but possibly it may affect your job opportunities.
And it started from the school, because the priest, being a Roman Catholic controlled school, the priest had the authority to say, well, you're not accepted. So it really cost. I mean, you would have known the meaning of Jesus saying, if you follow me, take up your cross, because there were crosses that you had to take up.
Reverend Marshall told me before he passed on, because we spoke extensively, that Reverend Alister Alexander, that he got saved. Reverend Marshall invited Reverend Alister to church. Now, it's not like what this building we have now, as in Dr. Alister Alexander's own words, he said that this is a cathedral. As compared to what was then referred to as the matchbox. And if this is a cathedral and then it's not that big, you can imagine what it was like.
It is the smallest church building I have ever seen. To this day. I mean, with a little exaggeration, you could stretch your hand across from one wall to the next. It was a culture shock. Religious culture shock, because one, the building was extremely small. I came from a church where it was a Gothic type of a building, and you sing songs and hymns. You could hear the roaring of the pipe organ and the crescendo of the music rising to this tall building. You leave that and come into a 2x4 situation where there is no music, no pipe organ, no organ at all. All there was a guitar and some people beating the life out of some tambourines that they had in there, and clapping and that kind of stuff. I was shocked, to be honest with you.
Reverend Marshall told me that he was the sort of the mentor for Pastor Alexander, and in the early days he will tell me about it, the times they come from church and they hit the open services, and they will walk from Latas to Sotes, and after that they head for the open meetings, do the street meetings, then walk back home. And also there were the times when they will come together and spend nights praying.
Hello?
Hello, Ms. Joseph?
So he was Roy Marshall's convert. I think Roy was the one who got him to accept the Lord as his Savior, and he started coming. But he was just a teenager at the time. We both were teenagers at the time. From then on, from the time he was a Christian, he became a Christian, he was very, very solid. And he came in, and the Lord used him in a remarkable way, which I was very, very proud of. He was very, very sincere in what he did. And I remember there are times when we have a special speaker that come into the church. We invited them to the church, and they were not able to make it for some reason or the other. They would call on him, and he would preach a sermon as though he had studied it for a few months. So he was preaching like a trooper. We would have an open air, and he would preach as if he had studied before. But he would preach a beautiful sermon, and people would get saved. I had seen people kneel on the ground in the gravel on the grass, people crying out to God as a result of his preaching. And he was just a young teenager at the time. And Alister lived in River Sally, which is about 3 miles from Sotez. And he used to come down, walk. We had no vehicle in those days. Walk from River Sally, come to Sotez and meet us. There are a few of us there. And then walk from Sotez to Chantemelle or Samaritan, where we held open meetings. And we have seen great results as a result of his preaching there. Every week we did this. And, you know, I had really admired him. And then having to go back after the open meeting, walk back to River Sally. It's miles and miles we used to walk to go to these open meetings and these other meetings here, because we concentrated on one place until something is established. Maybe we could have a church there or something like that. And that is one of the things that I admired about him, to have it to walk all these miles.
After receiving Christ in 1952 and engaging in evangelism, a young Alexander was faced with the dilemma of choosing either secular or religious education. As fate would have it, it was the opportunity to pursue religious education that would rear its head first. This opportunity, which was nothing short of miraculous, fostered the arrival of Alexander to the doors of the West Indies School of Theology in 1954. After successfully completing his course of study in 1957, Alexander engaged in extensive evangelism across the region.
Week or 2 week crusade in a community with a church, and there was no hotel or guest house to put you up, so you stayed with the pastor.
Right.
And there was sometimes just 2 bedrooms. The pastor's children occupied one, himself and his wife occupied the next. So the mother slept with the children and you slept with the pastor.
Right.
But that was a little difficult for me, because sometimes the pastors, they slept and I wasn't accustomed to it. They snowed like thunder was rolling.
But it was his experiences in Trinidad that would cement his position in the socio-religious landscape of the island. Among these experiences was his meeting with Pastor Ferdinand Lefleur's daughter, Lula Lefleur, who would later become Mrs. Lula Alexander. Spoke about getting married. How did you come to know or to meet Pastor Alister?
Well, one, my father being a minister in Pawi, inviting students to his church to preach at times. This is how I met him.
Okay.
I was very young. I was just 14 years when I knew him.
Wow.
And he was an excellent preacher. And we all loved to hear him. As a matter of fact, when he preached, you must write. Because when you get home, you're looking at all the big words that he uses. So you want to know what they really mean. So you have to listen to the sermon when he preaches, so that you can get something out of it when you get home and look at the big words that you're not accustomed with.
What was your impression of him as a person?
At that time, I just look at him as another brother in the Lord and excited about what God is doing, you know, as anybody else.
When did that friendship blossom into a sort of romantic connection?
Well, truly, when I saw it was getting serious, I was in the age in my 20s. And when I saw it was getting serious, I told the Lord, I do not want to marry a pastor. I said, God, not a pastor. Because I grew up in a pastor's house and I know how you have to live and how you have to be always at church and have to be always doing something. So I didn't want to go in that line at all. So I prayed hard. And the more he came close to me, is the more I prayed.
So you were praying to get him away?
Praying, so yes, praying. But one day, you know, I went home. I remember I went to a mission that they had. And when I got home, I realized that it was getting serious, and I didn't want it to be serious. And I said to God, I said, God, right now it's not my will, but your will be done in my life. Whatever you say for me, Lord, I will take it. But God, remember, it is your will for my life. And that is when the turnaround took place. And I really saw him in a different light. And I realized that is where God was calling me.
How was he as a family man?
Very caring. Still caring. Care very much for his family. He's always interested to make sure that everything is all right with all of us. I try to make preparations so that it makes it easier for him in doing things. And I also try to make sure that things are happening so that when he gets to the church, things are in order.
What about the accomplishments that you all have? When you look back and see how many pastors have come out of the ministry, how many churches have been started and are continuing to grow today, how do you feel being a part of that?
Feel blessed. We realize that there's a hand of God in the ministry. And what we admire a lot is to know that you don't have to beg the people to get involved in ministry. They just fall into ministry, and some attend Bible school, and those who don't, they attend our Bible studies here in the church. But it's great to know that you have so many, it's over 100 persons in ministry through Daybreak.
Wow, yes. That's amazing.
Yes.
As I casually peruse the aisles of Daybreak Assembly here in Coconut Drive, Mova, I'm quite certain that I've just mimicked the walk of thousands who would have given their life to Christ at this very location under the ministry of Pastor Alister Alexander. This would have been not a walk of casualness as I would have engaged in, but one that marked the beginning of a spiritual journey for many. In fact, Pastor Alister Alexander's ministry in this location was one that was stemmed in ambiguity and uncertainty. In 1961, he was asked to come to Mova Pentecostal Church to engage in 2 weeks of crusade. Following that, he was asked again to carry on the crusade for 2 more weeks. Interestingly enough, after the crusade would have gone on for a month, Pastor Alister Alexander was asked to hold on as interim pastor of Mova Pentecostal. It has been 55 years, and Pastor Alister Alexander has still been holding on to his ministry here in Mova. In fact, his ministry here in Daybreak Assembly preceded his ministry at a location just a stone's throw away from this very location. Mova Pentecostal Church, as it was called, was located on Cipriani Street here in Mova. After acquiring a spot here at Coconut Drive, Mova, the ministry blossomed under its new name of Daybreak Assembly. Daybreak Assembly could be seen as a manufacturing house for many who have entered ministry in Trinidad and Tobago and across the region.
I am satisfied with my life. I had one struggle. I came from Bible school and I was in the ministry. I had accomplished a few things here and there. And in the community where I grew up as a boy, we had some young fellows there that were brilliant. They succeeded. There were some guys who succeeded. And so they had a get together. and the community recognized them because of their success.
Yes.
I didn't go that way into the secular, and I was there, and nobody saw me. And I went home that night, and I was troubled. I said I had the same intelligence. I knew I could accomplish what they have accomplished, and I began to second guess myself, the choice that I made. I got into the house and I pulled out my drawer and began to look for some of the things, the applications that I had made. I was making to this engineering career and that kind of a stuff. And in the midst of it, an awareness came into that room, and playing in the theater of my mind were these thoughts, and I gathered the thoughts together, and like I entered into a dialogue with divinity. God said to me, "Get up, put on the light, take the scripture, I want to talk with you." I got up, put on the light, said, "I want to give you an incident." I took it and get the Bible and got the scripture through the incident. Jacob is now going to Egypt. He is God's man, prince with God, but he is driven out of his own land by farming. He doesn't have food, and he doesn't have the clothes, the money. Things are bad, hard with him. So he goes down to Egypt to his son Joseph, and when he gets there, Pharaoh says to the older man who doesn't even have food to eat, "Come close and bless me."
Yes.
And I said, "What are you saying, God?" He said, "I am saying," and the reference came to my mind from the book of Hebrews, "without doubt, the lesser is blessed of the greater." And God said to me, 2 men are in there. One is great Pharaoh of Egypt, perhaps the most powerful nation, and the other is drawn from Canaan by hunger and starvation. But he calls him and asks him to lay his hand. Who of these 2 men would you consider by God's evaluation to be the greater? And I said, I didn't answer in my mind, still looking for an answer to rationalize my feeling.
Yeah.
And like God said, stick to it, answer. I said, okay. Jacob the greater. He said, how do you evaluate that? And a whole panoramic views, ideas start going to my mind. It was an operation that I still remember. But when I was finished with this, God said to me, don't evaluate your life and your contribution to society or to the kingdom of God or before me by these areas that you have been thinking about. And when I was finished, I was a different person in my thinking. I have not second-guessed myself from that time until now.
times I could not pray. Still, my God, He was faithful to me.
What an awesome time in God's presence today. For those that want to help us to spread the good news of Jesus, please help us by donating, and we have our banking details just at the bottom. And so that you don't miss a beat, please like and subscribe. God bless.